Hello and welcome, my name is Nate from Video Games Recon, and as per usual we're going to be recapping this week's popular culture and gaming news that I find interesting and think you will too. Please keep in mind this video was recorded either early Friday evening or Saturday morning on UK time, so some important news could be missing and that this video will be posted most likely on a Saturday or Sunday. Anywho, enough jibber jabber, without any further ado, let's do it to it. First up, let's go over this month's PlayStation Plus games and Xbox games with gold. Over on the green team we have Rainbow Six Vegas 2 and Tron Evolution on the Xbox 360, and on Xbox One we have Banner Saga 2 and Tumblestone. Rainbow Six Vegas 2 is a solid if old game, but Tron and Tumblestone strike me as very meh games. However, Banner Saga 2 is a decent score if you're into that sort of game, especially as it's only been out a few months. Now let's see what the blue team has to offer. On Vita we have Urashika Tainted Bloodlines and Prince of Persia Revelation. On PS3 we have Call of Juarez, Bound in Blood and Fat Princess. And finally on PS4 we have Fury and Saints Row Get Out of Hell. Not a bad month for PlayStation. A couple of decent looking games on Vita, on PS3 a couple of old but fairly revered games, and on PS4 we have a brand new indie game that looks pretty good, and Get Out of Hell, the standalone DLC from Saints Row 4, which is said to be expansive and fun, so not too shabby a month. According to executive Miyamoto, Nintendo didn't show off the codename NX at E3 as they were worried about the competition copying them, which unless they have something groundbreaking and really special, comes off as a little arrogant. Sure, recently they had some interesting, pioneering tech in the waggle controls of the Wii, which although financially successful, to be fair was a major gimmick, and the closest anyone came to copying it was PlayStation's 6-axis controls. You could also argue the Move controllers were heavily inspired by the Wiimote. But this one instance aside, Nintendo hasn't had any ideas worth copying for a while. So perhaps Nintendo should stop blowing their own trumpet and actually show us the NX. As if it's coming out early next year, they're going to have to show it anyway if they want anyone to buy it. And if it really does have some tech worth copying, you can be damn sure that Sony and Microsoft will have their own iterations in no time regardless of when the NX is shown. Sticking with Nintendo for a minute, Zelda Breath of the Wild will need to sell 2 million copies for it to be profitable, which if on the PS4 or Xbox One might not have been that big of a stretch with their massive install bases, but on Wii U, which at most has 12 million users, and the NX, which will be brand new hardware, is asking quite a lot of their fan base. That said, this game looks great, and with Zelda's name attached, I'd be surprised if they don't surpass 2 million in the first year. Sony executives don't plan on following in Microsoft's footsteps with its Play Anywhere unification strategy. I don't know how this is news. My answer to this article is, no shit Sherlock. I'm not even sure this is a good idea for Microsoft to give less of a reason for someone to buy an Xbox console. Personally, it doesn't really seem all that smart an idea. However, Microsoft, unlike Sony, has a vested interest in unifying the platforms, as they pretty much have a monopoly on PC operating systems, and makes way more money through this and other related divisions than its Xbox division does, and thus can recoup some losses from splitting its market in other ways. Whereas Sony has pretty much no vested interest in the PC space, and it would make no sense whatsoever financially or otherwise to throw their hat in the ring unless they decide to do away with their hardware altogether and become a service instead, which is highly unlikely anytime soon. Something that also looks unlikely is the linking of the PSN and Xbox Live networks. Although it looks like Xbox is more interested in this idea than Sony, I just don't see it happening no matter how much Xbox co-creator Ed Fries calls Sony out on doing so. Although it's very consumer friendly and I personally would like to see it, I don't think it's going to happen, as Microsoft seems to be going in a very different direction to Sony, perhaps being less reliant on their console as a platform. Like it or not, where your friends are playing is probably a larger factor in buying a console than its power, network and exclusives, and as Sony isn't diversifying in the same way as Microsoft, it makes little sense for them to do this. However, As PC is a different beast and isn't per se a direct competitor, I'd at very least like to see cross-platform play here, as it's pro-consumer and would earn Sony some brownie points without hurting their bottom line. In a couple more pieces of Xbox news, according to Microsoft, Xbox One Slim pre-orders are having an amazing start. This is one of those things where they're not going to come out and say the Xbox One Slim is doing shit and we don't expect much of it. And it's easy to say it's doing well when you're not showing your numbers. That said, I would imagine it is surpassing their seemingly humble projections, as first off, it's new tech, and people loves them some new tech, and also is flavour of the month. On top of which, those that can't wait for the Scorpio know to pre-order this rather than get the giant Betamax player that the standard Xbox looks like. Also in positive Xbox news, the Elite controller has sold over 1 million units, which is pretty impressive as they're expensive, and that's almost 1 in 20 Xbox users. I get why this is popular. I'd love to see Sony do it too, as the DualShock 4's build quality is pretty shoddy, particularly with the analog sticks, and as such my left stick plays up a bit in FPS games, so this is something I'd be interested in and might actually be a thing with all the rumours of the DualShock patents floating about. So kudos to the Xbox Elite controller, and now also their customisable controllers that are also a cool accessory and the envy of PlayStation users. The Resident Evil 5 remaster, or re-release, whatever you want to call it, is now out on PS4 and Xbox One, and according to Digital Foundry, runs like shit. Not only does it not really look any better, its attempt at trying to hit 60 frames per second is left wanting, as neither system can hit a reliable 60 frames a second, without significant drops, particularly on the Xbox. Whereas PCs with inferior hardware to said consoles have been hitting 1080p 60 frames per second for a good long while now, and so it appears poor optimization is to blame. Another Capcom flop in recent times is the soulless COD/Rainbow Six Siege clone set vaguely in the Resident Evil universe, otherwise known as Umbrella Corps. I called this one ages ago and just knew this game was going to suck and that nobody would be interested, but they still put it out anyway. I think partway through development they noticed that no one gave a fuck and decided to drop the price and expedite the progression, just to shit this thing out so not to lose any more money on its development. I think the only way they could have salvaged this game was to either can it and forget it existed, or make it free to play and had an open beta so as to quash its bugs and fix any balancing issues. The trailer for the Black Ops 3 Zombie DLC 3 has dropped and is full of dragons and giant robots. Personally, being a Zombies fan, Black Ops 3 hasn't really floated my boat so far. Not that I don't appreciate all the work going into it and the high production values, but it seems they're chasing more of the quest-based gameplay in BO3, and although I love a good quest, I prefer it to be optional instead of necessary to feel like you've had a productive game. Fans of this game seem to fall into two camps, those mad into quests and Easter eggs, and those who prefer the survival aspect, and I'm of the latter. That said, I was all ready to be cynical about this map, but then they just had to do it. Not only is the story of how the Battle of Stalingrad got started super interesting, on top of which this map has giant seemingly friendly dragons, and not just for show either, as it has dragons that you can actually fly, at least in some regard. But all of that pales into insignificance to probably my favourite weapon of all COD zombies, and the beast that is the PPSH. If there's anything that's going to get me stoked for this map, it's that weapon. I just hope they don't nerf it too much so as to balance it with the other weapons. The Division's first paid DLC drops to little fanfare and from what I can tell seems super underwhelming. The only thing of particular interest to me is the procedurally generated dungeons, which admittedly is a cool concept, perhaps inspired by games like World of Warcraft. But that aside, not a whole lot here to inspire people like me to play The Division again. I'm sure its hardcore following will be stoked for this, but if they want to appeal to a wider audience, they're gonna need to step up their game and could probably do with taking a leaf out of Destiny's book, as after year one, Destiny had really learned how, even if at least briefly, to engage both hardcore and even casual gamers to some extent and encourage them back into the fold. In sticking it to the man news, a woman had successfully sued Microsoft for forcing her computer to upgrade to Windows 10 without her permission. And as the computer had issues or wasn't capable of handling Windows 10, she had to get a new computer, which disrupted her business, and thus was awarded $10,000 by a judge. You could argue whether or not she deserved it, and whether Microsoft just rolled over on the case to save money from the litigation or not, but personally, I don't care. Good on her in my opinion. Windows 10 is wholly unnecessary. Unless you're a power user or it does something super clever in the background that I'm unaware of, Windows 10 does nothing for me and my PC whatsoever that Windows 7 wasn't already doing just fine. Except for now being way more buggy. So I'm chalking this one up to a win for the little people, and maybe this case is the reason they're reportedly changing their draconian forced upgrade system so as not to have to deal with more lawsuits in the future. AMD's RX 480 is out in the wild and it appears to be very underwhelming. Rumours were bound that it could sit anywhere around a GTX 980 or R9 390X up to somewhere in between a GTX 1070 and 1080. Whereas in actual fact, according to most benchmarks I've seen, it's a tad under the performance of a GTX 970, which is not really that impressive for PC enthusiasts. Sure, it's cheaper than a 970 and has much lower power requirements, but unless you have an old card or a low watt PSU and are looking to upgrade to modern standards on a budget, this is not the graphics card for you. On top of which, in my opinion, I'd sit back and wait to see what the specs and price of the upcoming GTX 1060 are before rushing out and buying this card. Fallout 4 mods for PS4 have run into some trouble and will be delayed. I don't know whether this is a specific issue with making this work on the PSN or not, or whether it's favouritism towards Xbox, which makes little sense to me either way as there's no exclusive deal with Microsoft and the PS4 has almost twice the user base. But whatever way you slice it, it sure does suck for PlayStation users. And finally, Left 4 Dead 3 confirmed. Maybe. Hopefully. Possibly. Unlikely? Well, it is Valve, so probably not going to happen, as they don't really seem to make games anymore, especially ones with 3 in the title. Anywho, a Valve employee was doing a developer tutorial showing some of the work they did on previous Left 4 Dead titles as an example, and in his workshop tools directory a file was named Left 4 Dead 3. Whether or not this is an in-house joke or a file left over from a bygone era, who knows. But suspiciously, it was soon after taken down and replaced with a folder just named Folder. So not a whole lot to stand on here, but if you're a Left 4 Dead fan, I guess you'll take some hope, however tangible, over no hope. So, that was my recap of the week's gaming news or points of interest. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff I'll miss each week, so feel free to post anything you're into that I missed in the comments section for discussion. Anywho, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share and subscribe for more BS of a similar nature. Thank you and goodbye.